Thank you, thank you. I think that last show was actually shot here in Glasgow. It's called Smoggy Queens on BBC Three. It's very eccentric, but it's good fun. I'm just going to borrow kind of what my co-founder Fainty did at the top of the video, which is to ask, raise your hand if you felt, and this, I'm really curious because you're all a group of people who seem very solutions-oriented. You're really in this space already, but I'm curious, who's felt powerless? Just raise your hand if you felt powerless looking at this issue. See hands, shoot, everyone. A few hands at first. I often ask that, in most spaces I go into, because I think it really gets to the heart of the myth that a lot of us learned early on about climate change, that it's individually our fault that it's happening and individually our responsibility to fix it. So God, if we just recycle enough or kind of take shorter showers, that's an attitude I encounter a lot, that people feel that overwhelmed, that if they do enough, they'll fix it. But of course, that's not true. This issue, perhaps more than any, is one that absolutely requires collective action and community. And that's really what I want to talk about with the Green Rider. So I'm an actor, in case it's not obvious. And I love working with other people. I love collaborating, getting into groups. The irony of the lifestyle of an actor is that it's incredibly lonely. You spend so much time waiting, doing temporary, precarious work, pulling pints, serving canapes. My partner works 8-9 hours a day serving coffee in Liverpool Street to people in finance. You're auditioning by yourself, you're learning lines by yourself. And add to that the sort of existential dread about the world being on fire, and you get the kind of isolation and loneliness that I think not just actors are experiencing, but a lot of young people are experiencing in today's world of work. The antidote to those feelings of isolation and powerlessness is community. And I think particularly with creatives, the flip side of the experience I've just described is that when we get together in little communities, we can do amazing things. That's how plays, TV, film is produced. And you build these little families very quickly. You fall in love very quickly, on screen and off. So, experiencing all these feelings as we were, a group of friends of mine decided we were sort of sick of feeling that way, and we wanted to form a collective. And we built this group called Equity for a Green New Deal. It's a community that's rooted in our trade union. And the sort of vision that we had for that was we wanted everyone's contribution, everyone's viewpoint, regardless of where you are on the food chain and your level of power, to feel valued. We also wanted to connect climate work, sustainability to people's everyday working lives. So I think, it's amazing that I actually haven't felt this way at all being here today, but I think sometimes to a lot of people who aren't in this space, climate change or sustainability, it can kind of feel like it lives off over here, and how does that actually affect what I'm doing day to day? And of course we know it affects everything. It affects the price of food, the temperature when you turn up to work. It affects whether you can work in the place that you always have done, as a lot of screen workers, really experienced firsthand in LA because of the wildfires this year. So we got together and we built this collective, and we want to make our workplaces cleaner, greener, fairer, and we're looking at this industry, this incredibly fast, immensely wasteful screen industry. Has anyone ever been on a film set? Just raise your hand if you've... Yeah, so you'll know firsthand, right, that it's very quick, particularly if you're working on location. There's often diesel generators running, production kind of bursts in and can sort of colonize a space, and you're burning through props and sets and costumes. And a lot of that is tied to status as well, which I'll come on to in a second. But to sort of put this in context, the average blockbuster, so let's say Wicked, which was shot at Pinewood, produces as much carbon pollution as the city of Brighton does in 2 months. So it's a big behemoth, these things that come about. And as I say, so much of that is tied to status. So if you're in the 1% of actors, you get these huge Winnebagos, there's a big bed in there, you fly by private jet. If you're working in the UK and you go, I really miss my car that I use in LA. Production might fly it over for you. That's a true story. I won't say who it was. Another example, Sandra Bullock, when she was shooting Gravity at Pinewood, said, could I have a creche just for my kid to play in? She had a newborn. Because George Clooney was on Favoured Nations contract with her, they had to build him something of equivalent value. So they put together a tiki bar in the studio. I have no idea if George Clooney had any idea that existed or it was being done in his name. But that's the way that the kind of system of status and the sort of traditions of hierarchy in our industry can operate. What we wanted to do was look at that model and think, well, if actors can demand that level of consumption through their influence, can we marshal that influence in the opposite direction? Can we use it to upgrade things and put our industry on a cleaner, more sustainable footing? TV and film, as I say, you know, a big blockbuster like Wicked does have a significant pollution footprint, but compared to sort of cement, fossil fuels, it's not the most polluting industry. That said, we have a huge cultural footprint. About 5 billion people on any given week will tune into TV and film. So the sort of scope 3, if you will, of TV and film is that those lifestyles, the lifestyles of the rich and famous, can end up being glamorized, this sort of pollution-heavy, consumption-heavy lifestyle. So we thought, well, if we can get actors, instead of using riders that often demand those very polluting perks, to instead ask for things that made the world a better place, could we flip the script? Could we make it so that our value, our worth as human beings wasn't measured by what we consume, but by the kind of leadership and contribution we can make to building a better world? We had a suspicion that a lot of the actors that we'd come into contact with would feel the same way as us. So we put together this open letter, all as volunteers. We put together an open letter, we shared it as much as we could, and it just took off. We got far more people than we ever anticipated putting their names to a document saying, I want to use a green rider, I want to make our industry better, I don't need this crap that's sort of being thrown at me to make me feel valuable. We had people like Bill Nye, Papa Essiedu, Benedict Cumberbatch, Bella Ramsey, a lot of the people you saw on that video, Ben Whishaw, put their names to it. We went and launched it at Edinburgh TV Festival. Sorry, not Glasgow. But we got all this sort of buzz and hubbub around it. We went on news nights, which was really fun. And then the real work started. BBC and Sky came to us and said, this is cool. Let's test it out. Let's see if it works. And let's use the Green Rider in the heart of a bunch of productions. It was 5 TV series, 3 short films, a lot of which were featured in that sizzle reel. And I want to share a couple elements of the blueprint that we worked out in that pilot scheme, because I think they can be replicated in other parts of business and government and elsewhere. So the first real principle that we learned was to collaborate and not make demands. So we've heard of traditional riders where you want green M&Ms, or what is it, no brown M&Ms, whatever the Motley Crue one was. I heard a crazy one recently about Grace Jones, who not only liked oysters and champagne, but also a group of young men to be in her trailer that she could sort of pick from after a gig. And we thought, well, instead of actors coming in and kind of making demands like that, what if we flipped it and made it more about offering collaboration? So we have something called the handshake agreement. It's actually not a rider. It's just a statement of, this is what I'm up for. Can you come with me on this journey? What can you, as producers or a big studio or a big company, how can you meet me? We found that model of dialogue and collaboration was so much more successful. The second piece was to start building community into this initiative. So right at the very beginning of prep, well before the camera first starts turning, we assemble a green team. And this is like a little citizens' assembly inside a TV or film production. So yes, it has the key execs, the heads of production, the people who hold the purse strings in it, but we also want to see representatives from every department there so that they can feed in and make sure that their concerns and their priorities are taken into consideration. Community. And I'll give a little example of why that matters. It occurred to me because it was on a production that was shooting in Scotland as well. One of the easiest switches that we found TV and film sets can make is to replace the diesel in their generators and their unit vehicles with something called HVO. Do people know what HVO is? Hydrotreated vegetable oil. It's like, I'm seeing some nods. It's basically cooking oil. I've actually seen a truck on the way here that was going around collecting it. And it's kind of a transition fuel. The industry is really moving to clean tech, clean mobile tech. But in the meantime, HVO is really powerful. It can bring down energy emissions by about 80%. That being said, the drivers of those vehicles that we're wanting to make that change on, that's their livelihood. We encountered a lot of mistrust, suspicion, quite a lot of hostility actually initially to that change. So it was incredibly important. The way that that was solved was to bring the drivers into that conversation, make sure they understood why we were doing it, how it was going to be done, that they were still going to be the experts on their piece of the production pie. And they did, they came along with it, and as it happened, the next production that was shooting in that location, that production company was insisting that the driver company that they were going to hire would have to use HVO. So the driving company that had just been trained on a Green Rider production was able to go, we know how to do that, and we can take that job on. What was I going to say to you next? The blueprint that we've developed in doing that is now very exciting for us, being rolled out across the industry. Bella Ramsey, this is an exciting one for us, just announced that they're using the Green Rider on The Last of Us, or used it on The Last of Us, which is now on air. Benedict Cumberbatch, as you saw, is going on and is putting this into the sort of the lifeblood of those bigger productions, those bigger companies. And we work as an NGO. We're a non-profit, so we don't make money from it. We try to go in and consult where we can and get actors to use their influence in that way. The piece of it that really gets me out of bed in the morning is the thing that I said actually on that video, that looking over history, progressive steps forward didn't start with legal changes. They often originated in culture. We know in TV and film that a change to how our industry works can ripple out and affect the rest of society. Me Too is a great example of that. Perhaps more profoundly, the kinds of stories that we tell on screen has huge impact. One of my favorite examples is the show Will and Grace. People remember Will and Grace? That show measurably changed people's attitudes to the LGBTQ community in the US, because for the first time, conservative households in middle America were seeing gay characters in their living rooms, and they felt like they knew those people. There are so many examples that I'd list of that kind of progress, but a couple that are really current. Adolescence has ignited a worldwide conversation about masculinity, right? Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which won a BAFTA a couple days ago, brought to national attention this huge public scandal. So we know that we can do the same on the issue of climate. We can take the solutions that you've all been talking about today and normalize them for the wider public, but also inject people with that feeling of agency. So we're not just seeing the images that were at the beginning of that sizzle reel of urgent disaster, but also the sense that, yes, we have the solutions to fix this, and we can imagine a better, brighter future. I will, however, turn just briefly to a slightly darker note, because before coming here, I was thinking, well, what are the storytellers of our day telling us about our society now? And it might be my confirmation bias, but the kinds of things that I keep seeing are shows like White Lotus, Succession, Squid Game, Parasite, The Menu. All of those stories, what they seem to have in common is this sense that the concerns and difficulties of ordinary people are being ignored by the wealthy and the rich who are acting selfishly. And if you really want to bum yourselves out, have a look at something called the Edelman Trust Barometer. It's an incredible piece of polling and research. their most recent release finds basically all the evidence to back that up, and actually echoes a lot of what Andy Aldane from the RSA was saying. A couple of stats I'll throw at you. 61% of people globally hold a high sense of grievance against government, business, and the rich, believing that these institutions are making their lives harder and serve a narrow interest that only benefits other wealthy people. Only 17% of people in the UK believe the next generation will be better off. And we're seeing where that leads to, right? We're seeing far-right political parties succeeding across the world, and even seeing increased support for violence as a tool of social change. The good news, though, is that contained within that report, and I think instinctively for a lot of people here, we can see the solutions to that. We can see the channels to start rebuilding trust. Something that really leapt out to me in that report is that the people feeling most aggrieved actively want their businesses and employers to take more action on affordability, discrimination, and climate change, not less. That gives us so much license to act. Perhaps one of the most popular positions in that report was that 85% of people want businesses to deliver good-paying jobs, to root their business in local communities, to give them skills for the future, to ensure their rights are upheld at work. 62% of respondents, 62% of the highly aggrieved want business to be doing more on climate change. In our humble experiment with Green Rider, what we've really learned is that to deliver on that, relationships and community are the bedrock of everything that we try to do. We only succeed if we build these small groups on our film and TV sets. We pull from all kinds of different departments. We're bringing in diverse range of experience and expertise. And we make sure that those people can keep collaborating, communicating with each other so that their contributions continue to feel valued. The last thing that I'll leave you with is that climate change and climate action remains an incredibly popular issue to act on. Between 80 and 89% of people in poll after poll really want their governments to act on this. From our perspective, that means focusing on progress, not purity, reminding people that we have all the solutions that we can, getting businesses, NGOs, and media to work with each other, and finally, it's not a silver bullet, but if there's one thing above everything else that I think makes that doable, it's community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. A big salute to you. We need to ask you 3 very quick questions, okay? Yeah. But we have to be quite quick because we're beyond time. Use the handheld. When will we be able to see visibly whether a production has been produced with a Green Rider or not? Will it appear in the credits?
That's something we'd love to see. Yeah. Some of it's sensitive because the way that actors work behind the scenes is wrapped up with their contracts, that kind of thing. So we'll see. Yeah. What we really encourage actors to do is to speak up about what they're doing at work, but not have it be this like, aren't I brilliant as a massive celebrity? Yeah. Instead, be talking about the community that they've built in their workplaces.
Well, I'm thinking more from the consumer perspective. Will you know you've gone to see a green film or not? But take the point. Very detailed question here from Anonymous. How is a decision made in a certain scene, for example, where there's an explosion or a car chase or something, as to whether it's going to be filmed using, as it were, high-octane, high-carbon products, or whether it can be made in a different way? Who makes that decision?
It'll often be made well before you're on set. Yeah. There'll be a whole load of factors going into it. I actually don't know the answer as to whether you could film those sorts of action sequences in a sort of less, I guess, destructive way. But ultimately, it's the studio heads and the stakeholders that they respond to. So if we can get the number one on the call sheet, so to speak, the star of the movie or the TV show, to come at the beginning and say, can we do this in a different way? That's when you start to kickstart change.
Right, brilliant. And then the last question is, somebody said there are a lot of wasteful riders in the music industry too. Are you in touch with musicians and others, and is there going to be a similar parallel initiative there?
Yes, actually, this is a great one to look at. Act 1.5. This is an initiative set up by Massive Attack. They did this huge festival in Bristol last year, 32,000 people. It was like the cleanest gig ever. Ecotricity provided all the battery storage. It was all plant-based food. They had trains and buses for people. It's an incredible initiative. They're now working with Billie Eilish on her tour, so highly recommend checking that out.
Brilliant. Will, thank you so much. Will Attenborough, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.